Welcome to AI Paper Podcasts. We break down the latest research papers so you don't have to.
Making complex AI accessible.
Exactly. Today, we're tackling a really cool paper, Dexterous Vision Language Grasp Model at Scale.
Yeah, this one's generating some buzz. It's all about getting robots with complex, human-like hands to grasp specific parts of objects just based on language commands.
Think about telling a robot, grab the hammer by the handle, not just grab the hammer. It sounds simple, but it's been a huge hurdle.
Right. And this paper introduces two key things. First, a massive new dataset called Dex GraspNet 3.0. We're talking 170 million grasp poses, all labeled with parts and language.
170 million, that's staggering.
It really is. And second, they built a large model, DexVLG, designed specifically to use this data. It takes envision what the robot sees and language what you tell it to generate those precise grasps.
So essentially, it's bridging that gap between just telling a robot what to do and the robot understanding how to physically interact with a specific part of an object to achieve it. A big step for dexterous manipulation.
Absolutely. It's about making robot interaction much more intuitive and functional.
Okay, so let's dive deeper. The paper kicks off by talking about this dexterity gap. We see robots doing amazing things, right? Especially with these large vision language action models, the VLAs.
They're getting pretty good.
But they often use really simple grippers, like basically tongs. Good for picking up whole objects, maybe.
Yeah, parallel grippers. Very limited.
But controlling those multi-fingered, super complex hands, the ones that look like ours, that's been, well, a different story. Much harder problem.
It really has. And the bottleneck, like so often in AI, really comes down to data. Or rather, the lack of the right kind of data.
Oh, so?
Well, think about how you'd collect data for teaching a complex hand to grasp. You could try manually retargeting human hand motions onto the robot hand.
Sounds tedious.
Incredibly. Or you could teleoperate the robot, literally guiding its hand with yours through VR or something. Again, super slow, super expensive, very human intensive.
Right, you can't scale that up easily. So what about generating grasps automatically? I know there are earlier versions like Dex GraspNet 1.0 and 2.0.
Yeah, analytic methods, they can generate lots of grasps, millions even, but they were mostly semantic unaware.
Meaning they didn't get the why.
Exactly. They could generate a stable grasp for a hammer, but maybe it grabs the head when you actually needed the handle to, hammer something.
Ah, so it lacked functional understanding, grabbing the right part for the intended task.
Precisely. And previous datasets that did try to capture functional grasps were just too small. Limited objects, limited examples. You couldn't really train a general purpose model on them.
Okay, so that sets the stage perfectly for the big solution they proposed, Dex GraspNet 3.0.
The dataset breakthrough, yeah. The scale is just, well, you said it's staggering. 170 million dexterous grasp poses.
And across a huge variety of objects.
174,000 diverse objects pulled from the Objaverse dataset. It is by far the largest dataset of its kind.
But it's not just the scale, right? It's the kind of data.
That's the crucial part. It's part-aware and language-aligned. Each of those 170 million poses isn't just a grasp for an object. It's a grasp for a specific semantic part of that object.
Like the handle, the head, the lid, the spout.
Exactly. And each grasp is paired with a descriptive caption. Like the paper's example. Grasped the handle of the hammer versus grasped the metal head of the hammer.
That's what enables functional grasping. The robot can understand the instruction refers to a specific part and grasp accordingly.
And this is critical. Every single one of those poses, all 170 million, was checked in a physics simulation.
Using Isaac Gem, right?
Yeah. They made sure the grasp was actually stable, physically plausible. Could it resist gravity? Was it a solid hold? So the data isn't just big, it's high quality and physically grounded.
So how on earth did they actually build this data set? Synthesizing and validating 170 million grasps sounds like a monumental task, even with simulation.
It was, but they were clever about it. They built on the efficient grasp synthesis pipeline from their earlier Dex GraspNet network.
Okay, so they had a starting point for generating grasps quickly.
Right. But then they introduced what they call part-aware energies. Think of it like adding a targeted magnetic pull during the grasp generation process.
So it guides the simulated fingers towards the specific part they want to grasp.
Exactly. It encourages the fingers to land on, say, the mug handle, not just anywhere on the mug, making the generated grasp semantically meaningful for that part.
Smart. And how did they identify the parts and create the language descriptions? That sounds like it could require a ton of manual labeling.
Well, this is where they brought in some heavy-hitting AI tools for identifying the parts on the 3D object meshes. They used SEMish.
That does zero-shot segmentation.
Correct. It can basically look at a 3D object it's never seen before and identify distinct geometric parts, like this looks like a handle, this looks like a base.
Without needing specific training for that object type.
Okay. And then, for naming those parts and writing the descriptive captions like grasp the part of the object, they use GPT-4o.
Wow, okay. So they're using a large language model to generate the labels and instructions for training the grasping model. It's AI building the foundation for more AI.
Pretty much. It allowed them to automate the semantic annotation at a massive scale, which would have been impossible manually.
And the validation was pretty strict too, you mentioned.
Oh yeah. 4 main criteria. Minimal penetration. The hand shouldn't go through the object or itself.
Makes sense.
Stability against gravity from 6 directions, pull down, up, left, right, front, back. The grasp has to hold.
Robust check.
And crucially, a part alignment condition. This makes sure the fingers were actually contacting the intended part, not just nearby or accidentally brushing against it.
So they really filtered for high-quality functional grasps, and the captions themselves were detailed.
Very. The template was something like, grasp the part of the object with contacts on fingers. So it includes which fingers should be making contact. Rich information.
And they even simulated putting these objects on tables and viewing them with a realistic camera model.
Yep, they simulated dropping objects onto a tabletop in Isaac Gym, and then rendered views using parameters matching a RealSense D415 camera.
So the training data looks a lot like what a real robot might see, trying to bridge that sim-to-real gap from the start.
Exactly. Make the transition to the real world smoother.
Okay, so we have this incredible data set, Dex GraspNet 3.0. Now, how do you actually teach a robot to use it? That brings us to the model, DexVLG.
Right. The Dextrous Vision Language Grasp model. This is the brain they built to learn from all that data.
What does it take as input?
2 main things. First, a single view colored point cloud, that's the robot's vision.
Great.
A 3D snapshot of the object from one angle with color information.
Okay, what it sees?
Second, the language instruction. The command like grasp the neck of the bottle.
What you tell it, and the output.
The full dexterous hand pose.
Yeah.
That includes the 60 pose of the wrist, its position and orientation in space, plus all the joint angles for the fingers. They use the shadow hand, which has 22 joints. So a very detailed output.
22 joints. Wow. So how does the model actually work? What's inside?
It leverages large foundation models. For the vision part, understanding the point cloud, it uses a pre-trained encoder called Uni3D.
Based on a vision transformer, I assume.
Yeah, a VIT backbone, scaled up quite a bit, 307 million parameters. It's designed to pull out semantic features from the 3D data and, importantly, align them with language concepts.
So it learns to connect bits of the point cloud with words like handle or lid.
Kinda, yeah. And for the language understanding side, it uses the LLM components from Florence 2. That's another big model, up to 771 million parameters.
Okay, so you've got a powerful vision encoder and a powerful language model. How do they work together to generate the grasp?
This is where the visual features and the language instruction come together. The LLM part essentially conditions the grasp generation. It helps the model reason about what part the instruction refers to on the object it's seeing.
And the actual grasp pose generation.
They use a technique based on flow matching. It's a type of denoising process. Instead of predicting the pose directly, it starts with sort of a noisy random pose and iteratively refines it, removing the noise until it converges on the target grasp pose.
Conditioned by the combined vision and language understanding.
Exactly. And this whole thing is fine-tuned end-to-end on the Dex GraspNet 3.0 dataset.
And a key takeaway here, the paper really emphasizes this, is that you need these large models for this task.
Yeah, that was a major finding. They compared with smaller models, and the smaller ones just couldn't handle the complexity. They struggled to learn that intricate mapping between language, vision, and the precise multi-finger control needed.
So the scale of the model seems necessary to really integrate these different modalities, vision, language, action effectively for such a nuanced task.
It seems so. The complexity demands that capacity.
Okay, theory and architecture are great, but does it work? How did they test DexVLG?
Rigorously. They used 3 main metrics in simulation. First, basic success rate sucks. Can the robot pick the object up 3 centimeters and hold it for a second without dropping it?
Simple enough. Pass-fail on the grasp itself.
Then, part touch accuracy, PTA. Did at least one finger touch the correct intended part? And was that finger closer to the target part than any other part?
Okay, getting more specific now. Checking if it aimed correctly.
And the strictest one, part grasp accuracy, PGA. This requires at least 3 fingers to be grasping the intended part, and again, those fingers need to be closer to that target part than anywhere else.
So PGA really measures if it achieved a stable, multi-finger grasp on the right spot. That sounds like the key metric for functional grasping.
It really is. And DexVLG performed extremely well across the board in simulation. It significantly outperformed the baseline models, including earlier Dex GraspNet versions, even ones they tried augmenting with some language understanding using CLIP.
But the really exciting part for you listening is probably the generalization tests. How does it handle things it hasn't seen before?
This is where it gets impressive. On the unseen benchmark, objects totally new to the model DexVLG still achieved a 79% success rate, so it could still pick up most novel objects.
And the part accuracy?
A 36% part grasp accuracy, the strict PGA metric, which might sound low compared to 79%, but remember how hard PGA is, and this is on completely unseen objects. It shows a significant ability to generalize the concept of part grasping.
That is pretty good for zero shot on novel objects. What about variations in how the parts are defined?
Good question. They tested that too, using a different segmentation method, SAMPAR 3D, to define the parts at test time.
So the way the object was understood or broken down into parts was different from training.
Exactly. And even then, DexVLG got a 76% success rate and a 52% part grasp accuracy. That robustness is really important for real-world use.
It really shows the power of the large vision language model backbone, doesn't it? Being able to handle not just new objects, but new names for parts it hadn't explicitly trained on.
Absolutely. The Florence 2 LLM base allows it to leverage broader language understanding. They specifically noted that even with novel part names in the unseen benchmark, DexVLG could often figure out the instruction, demonstrating that VLM generalizability.
And this contrasted sharply with the smaller models.
Oh, big time. The paper highlights this trade-off. When they tried to add language conditioning to smaller models, their overall grasp success actually went down.
So trying to make them understand language made them worse at grasping.
Kind of.
Okay.
It suggests they just lacked the capacity. The language instruction confused them more than it helped. They couldn't integrate it effectively with the vision and action components.
Fascinating. Proves the need for scale here. What about more complex instructions?
They tested that too, conditioning the grasp on specific contact fingers, like grasp the handle with the thumb, index, and middle finger.
Really precise commands.
And DexVLG learned to follow these. Small models, again, got confused by this extra instruction, and their performance just fell apart.
Okay, simulation results are strong. Did they try it in the real world?
They did. They used a real shadow hand on a UR10E arm with a RealSense camera. The whole setup. Pretty impressive results. Giving commands like grasp the neck of the bottle, they achieved an 80% success rate and 75% part accuracy on various physical objects.
80% success and 75% part accuracy in the real world is quite something. That sim-to-real transfer seems to have worked reasonably well.
Yeah, seeing those numbers in physical trials is always a big validation step.
The paper also includes ablation studies, right? Digging into why it works so well.
Several key insights there. First, data scale is crucial. Unsurprisingly, training on the full 170 million poses of Dex GraspNet 3.0 gave much better performance, especially generalization, compared to using just 10% or 20% of the data.
More data, better results. That tracks.
Yep, big, high-quality data matters.
What about model size? We talked about needing large models, but did bigger always mean better within the large models they tested?
This was actually one of the most nuanced findings. The largest model they tested, around 1 billion parameters, only gave marginal gains in overall success rate compared to models around 250, 320 million parameters.
Only marginal.
And interestingly, the effect on part accuracy was inconsistent. Sometimes the 1B parameter model was slightly better, sometimes slightly worse. The 320M model actually had the best part accuracy in several tests.
So it wasn't just bigger is always better. There might be a sweet spot.
It seems that way. It raises questions about whether simply scaling parameters indefinitely is the optimal path, at least for this specific, very nuanced task. Maybe efficiency and architecture matter just as much past a certain capacity threshold.
That's a really important point for researchers and engineers thinking about resource allocation. What else stood out from the ablations?
Color. Using colored point clouds instead of just shape information made a huge difference.
Really? How much?
On one benchmark, LVIS seen, using color boosted the success rate by nearly 28% and the strict part grasp accuracy by over 23%.
Wow, that's significant.
It highlights how important color cues are for identifying objects and crucially for distinguishing semantic parts. Think about a tool with a brightly colored handle. Color helps a lot.
Makes sense. Anything else?
They found wrap grasps using more fingers to surround the part were generally more stable and successful than pinch grasps, though pinch grasps offer flexibility. And technically, the flow matching technique they used for predicting the grasp pose significantly outperformed older diffusion model approaches like DDPM or DDIM for the specific problem.
So the specific way you generate the pose matters too.
Definitely. Lots of factors contribute.
Okay, let's try and summarize the key takeaways from this deep dive. DexVLG, trained on this absolutely massive, part-aware, language-annotated Dex GraspNet 3.0 dataset. It's a major step forward.
Yeah, it's demonstrably better at getting robots with complex hands to follow natural language instructions to grasp specific parts of objects. It's bridging that gap between high-level commands and low-level dexterous control.
And why should you, our listener, care about this?
Well, think about where this could lead. Robots in manufacturing or logistics that you can instruct more naturally. Grab the blue wire by the connector, place the bottle cap down.
Or robots in homes or healthcare handling delicate objects with more precision based on verbal guidance. Maybe even assisting surgeons with specific tool maneuvers?
Exactly. Giving robots the ability to understand and interact with parts of objects based on language unlocks a whole new level of capability and usefulness. It makes them potentially much more versatile partners in the physical world.
It really does. Which brings us to our final thought for you to mull over. If robots can now understand which part to grasp and how to grasp it with dexterity just from language, what's the next big leap for these vision language action models?
Moving beyond just grasping.
Yeah. Imagine robots that don't just pick up the screwdriver by the handle when you ask, but can then intuitively use it to turn a specific screw, understanding the entire task sequence from a simple command. What does that level of combined understanding, dexterity, and action sequencing mean for automation, for collaboration between humans and machines, and just for how we interact with intelligent systems in our daily lives?
That's the big question, isn't it? From grasping parts to performing entire functional tasks. That's the next frontier.
Definitely something to think about. That's all for this episode of AI Paper Podcasts. Thanks for tuning in.
See you next time.